You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Welcome to Volatility Views, the premier program for volatility traders. Each week, we'll take a deep dive into the world of volatility with in-depth analysis, trading activity reviews, strategy breakdowns, cutting-edge education, and much more. We'll also bring you exclusive conversations with the traders, researchers, and asset managers who are reshaping the volatility landscape. If it involves volatility, then you'll find it on Volatility Views. And now, it's time to take a deep dive into the world of volatility. It's time for Volatility Views.
All right, everybody. That music means we are back. It is Friday. It is noon Central. It is 1 p.m. Eastern. Do you know what's going on in this wild world of volatility? Well, let's find out together, shall we? It is time once again for Volatility Views, the premier program for volatility traders. My name, of course, Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as from the network. Got a little bigger this week, 17 and a half years, and not just going strong, but growing. So I hope you enjoyed the Futures Rundown, the latest addition to the network. You folks have been on me for years, folks in the business. When I go to events and things have been on me for years. When are you going to add a future show? When are you going to add a future show? Well, the drumbeat became incessant. It became undeniable. And hence the Futures Rundown was born this past Wednesday. A great one. Had Miss Carly Garner on there for the inaugural guest, doing a great job there, just going deep into the world of futures. And more to come. So if you liked that, that show is going to grow and evolve over time, as they all do. So I'm looking forward to seeing what it becomes. It's already a hot out of the gate. I can't wait to see what it becomes in weeks, months, and years down the road. Lots of fun over there. So check out the Futures Rundown if you haven't done so yet. You should be listening to the full network at this point. I know there's a hardcore VolViews crew out there, and we love you all. You're all over the globe, and we love you. But you should be listening to the full network. You're missing out on a whole bunch of fun, including some vol talk on the Future Show. We talk a little bit about VIX futures on there. They are futures, after all. Anything futures is fair game on that show. So lots of fun. The Futures Rundown. Check it out if you haven't done so already. And, of course, stay tuned after Volatility Views. I'll be back talking all things unusual activity. Man, banger week to have some VIX flies, huh? All sorts of fun. We'll get all that fun and a little bit more on Options Oddities coming up after this show. One place to go to get all that, theoptionsinsider.com/pro. That gets you pro Q&As. Just saw this week hit 150 just on the Q&As alone. Man, there's a lot of Q&As, just Q&As, man. So a lot of content there for over probably 400 episodes, close to it now on the pro feed, theoptionsinsider.com/pro. Congrats to Madam Gigi, our winner of our pro trading crate for the month of August. If you want to check it out for yourselves, only one place to go, theoptionsinsider.com/pro. As we go around the horn, see who's joining us today on this fine Vol Views program. First, let's go out. Is he in the hinterlands of Chicago? Is he out somewhere in Indiana? I guess let's find out, as we are joined once again by the once future and present Dr. VIX, who moonlights as Dr. V Stocks, a.k.a. Mr. Russell Rhoads. Mr. Rhoads, welcome back to the show. 2 days in a row, a rare doubleheader, sir.
I know, and I promise I'm sharper today than I was yesterday. Yesterday, technology was hating me. I just couldn't get anything straight, and now I've had a good night's sleep. I've had my camion tea or whatever it is that we want to calm ourselves, and I'm going to be non-volatile talking about volatility today.
All right, we're looking forward to it, sir.
Better.
better as we keep on rolling down to the southern volatility mecca known as Austin, where we are joined once again by the greasiest of meatballs, Mr. Mark Sebastian from OptionPit.com. Mr. Meatball, welcome back to Volatility Views, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me. Quite the fun day. Plenty of vol to talk about. I'm excited.
Quite the banger. So let's get to it. It is time for the Volatility Review.
It's time to break down the latest developments in the volatility trading world. It's time for the Volatility Review.
All right, everybody, let's do it. Let's commence operations here on the Volatility Review, the portion of the show where we break down everything lighting up the vol market this week, trades, trends, unusual activity, all sorts of fun. And it is, of course, Jobs Friday. So, at the end of the day, all this data is being backed into what does it mean for the Fed. So today's number kind of interesting out here because, of course, we have the jobs number coming in this morning a little bit weaker than folks were looking for. So now we're kind of in this weird point, listeners. Is good news good news? Is good news bad news? Is bad news good news? All sorts of weirdness going on out there. It came out today, a weaker than expected jobs report. Clearly spooking some folks. We got some other fuel adding to the fire out there as well. Interestingly enough, the unemployment rate also ticking down. So kind of a weird kind of a little bit of good, a little bit of bad out there. All that combining, though, to a lot of red on the screen out there today. S&P seemed like we were going to come out of the gate decent today. Then it kind of just the bottom got cut out from under it today. We are back threatening the 5,400 level. Let's see. Did we bounce? We bounced right off it just a few minutes ago, actually. So 54.13 or so as we're kicking off the show. Down about 90 handles. What's 90 handles amongst friends, listeners? About 1.6% to the dark side right now. Dow off about 0.9%. And the NASDAQ, as it is wont to do, taking the bit in its teeth, off nearly 2.5% right now, about 2.43% or so. And our old pal small caps, let's check in on them as well, off 1.66% right now. So just a rough day for the Uncle Mike crowd out there, rough day for the bulls out there. But you've had a good run. You can't be too mad at this point if you take a little off the top. What's adding to the top, though, is our old pal VIX Cash just roaring back to life. Was at about a 23.30 when we kicked off the show. Puts it up a whopping 7.5 handles from where it was this time last week. So, man, good week to have some VIX flies. We'll get to all that fun in a bit. I already have complimented our pal, Mr. Overby, for his good timing. I actually had about 23.5 right now on VIX Cash, so it continues to tick up. That puts it up nearly 7.75 points, about 7.7 points from where it was this time last week. No surprise, the vol of vol also surging again. Back up to that level, like I was saying on the option block yesterday. 125 in the normal times, in the pre-pandemic times. It used to be kind of the ceiling for vol of vol. It could obviously get higher, and it did. But it was usually when you got up to this range, like, okay, we're feeling pretty frothy. We're probably going to top out here and start turning back around. These days, all bets are off. But 128 right now, up about 33 points from where we were this time last week. So a lot going on. The bulls just exhausted. All that buying, it tires you out. You got to take a break every now and then. Is this it? Is the worm turning? Are we plunging to the depths? All sorts of fun to be had. Let's go around the horn. The opposite of the way we started. Let's go out to the Southern Volatility Mecca. Mr. Meatball, sir, a lot going on out there on Jobs Friday. A lot of red. What's catching your eye, sir?
Yeah, they really pulled the rug out pretty quickly on the open. Initially when the news came out, futures rallied. And then in very short order, vol caught a very strong bid. And the market decided it wanted none of this and started selling off. Notably the NASDAQ, where there's a lot of pressure on NVIDIA. Obviously, AVGO had earnings last night. That's Broadcom. That is, which a lot of people don't realize, is bigger than Tesla. And it is down a whopping almost $14, call it 9%. And pretty crazy the pain that's in it, and that is kind of melting throughout. I mean, Meta's down 3%. Microsoft is below $3 trillion again. It's down 1.25%. Nvidia down 4%. About Amazon down 3%. The only one that still stands firm is Apple, which is only down 0.5%. And you have to wonder, if Apple goes, where goes the market? Because it is the lone bastion of strength in that what we like to call the Great Eight here.
The Great Eight. I know that's one that's been on your radar a lot of late. So an intriguing one nonetheless out there. Let's go around the horn to Mr. Rhoads, who's busy corrupting young minds for the future. Mr. Rhoads, what are the students saying today? Are they noticing this meltdown out there, and what's catching your eye in the vol landscape today?
I'm looking really smart today. I'm really looking smart today because I had class last night, and it was a heavy fixed income class where we talk about forward rates, et cetera. And of course, the Fed has an awful lot. It has a big influence on that one. And I was like, I'm really worried about this, about the stock market's reaction tomorrow to the employment number. That, if it's anything like the one in early August, and actually, if you look at revisions, et cetera, it might be worse. People are going to get the impression that the Fed's fallen behind the curve as far as managing the economy. And and that's why when we say when we see 25 basis points, everybody's like, that's a good cut. 50 basis points is considered a bad cut, and it's just a little bit silly that that something's that big, and that it's that big of a difference in attitude just over 25 basis points, which in reality probably it's more about the signal than the reality of cutting by 0.5% or cutting by 0.25%. So I find it unusual. What I'm looking at right now, and I'm not shy. Like one of my students said, "Well, you're going to tell us how you're trading it, or are you just going to tell us if it worked afterwards?" And this guy used to play in the NFL, so I don't fight with him. But I said, I always tell you up front, and when I'm wrong, people know it. When I'm right, people know it. I'm just going to go out on a limb right here. The interest rate probability, it's the odds of a 50 basis point cuts actually just reduced a bit using the Bloomberg tool, not the CME tool, but the Bloomberg tool today. So we may have it might be safe to buy stocks right now. Is really what I'm trying to fumble around with. Because I've been paying very close attention to, it's called the world interest rate projections on Bloomberg. And when we've had these two stock market sell-offs in the last 4 or 5 weeks, it has been accompanied by the odds going from 25 basis points to 50 basis points. So that's, you're watching the stock market reaction to the employment number, but I'm keeping a close eye on the derivative pricing and what it's indicating. And the fact that it's a little bit, it's leaning a tad more to 25 basis points makes me wonder if, and buying on Friday afternoons can be scary, but wondering if, now might be a time to dip your toe into the water.
Interesting. Mr. Rhoads, calling the bottom, buy it all with both hands now, he says. He screams into his microphone out there. Interesting stuff. You're right. That has been a debate for a while now as well on the interest rates front. For a while there, everyone's like, oh, we need 50 basis points. That'll be great. If you only get 25, the hell with this. We're going to crush the market. Now people are saying, you're right. Oh, wait, 50 basis points. Maybe that shows we're in a more dire situation than we perhaps anticipated. That's bad news now. So everything is good news. Everything is bad news. We're in that weird environment. You could look at everything a million different ways. Right now, at the end of the day, listeners, the old school hands on the SIBO were right. There's more sellers than buyers out there. And at least for now, that is the case. Let's keep on rolling out to the land of the futures. And a spoiler alert, futures are up. The curve is up. Everything is hot. And last week, we were just joking about how you couldn't find a 20 handle to save your life. You couldn't sniff a 20 handle on the VIX futures curve going all the way out to, let's say, May of next year, which is as far as my report here goes. You couldn't sniff a 20 handle to save your life. And now this week, you can find naught but 20 handles, with the exception, of course, of December. the seasonally weakest spot on the board. Even December can't get over a 20 handle. Even though it got close as we kicked off the show, it was at a 1985. But yeah, spoiler alert, everything's up across the board on the futures curve. Dogs and cats living together. Mass hysteria. That front future, as we kicked off the show, was up nearly 6 points in September, about 5.7. I'm sure if I re-racked that right now, it would probably be a different number entirely. And the OCC future up nearly 4 points, about 3.9 out there. So looking pretty juicy. Both of them hanging out right around the 21.5 level. So again, gives you a good sense for where we're hanging out right now. If we go all the way back out to, let's roll those dice all the way out to May of next year, listeners. The calm, cool, sane heads of May of next year are saying we're going to be at right around a 20.5, 20.40 out there. So yeah, 20 handles across the board. A lot of juice. Mr. Meatball, sir, what's catching your eye in a very hot VIX futures curve this week?
Yeah, I mean, it is definitely gone into a little bit of we're afraid mode. It was the curve was pretty much flat all week. We had the VIX itself trading at a premium to the curve itself, but the curve was pretty darn flat. Now we have it's starting to hint at maybe potentially going backward if we get one more day like today. I think we'll get there, and then who knows where things have gone. We'll go from there, but there is definitely a pretty aggressive bid for vol right now, especially in that front month.
We're afraid mode. I like that. So we're afraid mode out there in VIX cash, VIX futures land. Mr. Rhoads, same question for you, sir. What's catching your eye out there on the vol surface this week?
Eric beat me to the flatness. Right now, the range, it looks like the range is about $1.20 between the October contract, which is the highest one, and $1.50. Doing bad math there, Russell, in the December contract, which doesn't count because of seasonality. We know that. But in all seriousness, Jim Carroll tweeted out a pretty flat-looking VIX curve, and I just responded. I feel like I'm a broken record at this point in my career because I just say the same things over and over again. But flat VIX curve has always made me think it's time to throw your hands up and maybe take things down a bit because there's just too much uncertainty on the market. So I've always considered the curve flat when we're, like in the lower 20s or so, that, and of course today, VIX has gone up a lot more than the front month futures, but I've always felt like when we're, flat, especially on the short end of the curve, that's just the traders that there's just not a strong opinion in either direction. And typically, it takes a lot more to put on a position where you're long vol versus being short vol because long vol doesn't win as much. So you've got to assume just with flatness and just with uncertainty that it's mostly vol sellers getting out of the way, which can accentuate some upside moves as well. But I've always felt like flat VIX curve, who knows what's next? And I know that's not particularly helpful, but sometimes it's not such a bad thing to know when market conditions dictate a bit more caution.
Always good to know when to get the hell out of the way. What got the hell out of the way last month was some VIX futures. The numbers in from our friend over there at OCC, and they were putting up some numbers, which was good because the rest of the overall market, it was a hot number in the options world, 1.06 billion. That's anytime you hit a B handle in the volume charts for a month, that's nothing to sneeze at. I was kind of surprised at how robust August of 2023 was. It was almost 1.02 billion. So we weren't net up that much in August. I thought it was going to be a much more explosive month volume-wise than it ended up turning out to be. But one explosive highlight was indeed the VIX futures, up 26.4%. So whatever was lighting us up last August, I need to go back and look. They all kind of blur together now. Every month is just a maelstrom of madness out there. But last year, 5.5 million VIX futures on the tape. This year, nearly 6.98. So explosive growth out there in VIX futures this August compared to this time a year ago. The volume numbers for options kind of similar, but for whatever reason, VIX futures really kicking into gear out there this month. When we did have the sell-off, we did have some rejiggering going on out there with some of the vol products out there. So clearly that's driving some flow. But yeah, nearly 7 million contracts on the tape out there in VIX futures last month. So August, a banger. Let's move on to the mothership, the VIX options. And before we get there, Mr. Rhoads, we have to give some credit to our compatriot on the show last week, our buddy, Mr. Overby. We did mention him on Twitter last week, gave him his props already on Monday. But more are due now. He was talking, I know you were a big fan of this trade last week, Mr. Rhoads. He was talking about, I believe it was, I should know, I put it on for size, but it was the SEP 182429 fly. He was talking about buying it, I think, the week before for somewhere around 30 cents. I had some fun scooping a bunch of it for 19 cents on the show. Part of it just to tweak him, of course, because I got it for a lot cheaper than him. But I liked it so much, I ended up coming back after the show and buying a bunch more. And I talked about on Monday, I already unwound about half of it when it more than doubled. It got up to over 50 cents. And then I let the rest ride because it already had covered my rest of my position. I was in for a credit. And so I let the rest ride until today, and I got it off for a ridiculous level out there today, the rest. I wrote to Brian. I know he said he is recording an OPR, listeners, for us. So I think if you want to hear his detailed thoughts, he talked about the trade last week on OPR. If you want to hear about specifically how he took it off, I do believe he's going to be recording an OPR for us. But who knows? Maybe he'll send in his thoughts on how he unwound it so we can get a little bit of a nugget of insight here. But that was a banger. So hopefully you listened to that show last week and maybe you dabbled a little bit in it. Butterflies, obviously a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of different ways you could take them off, and the devil is always in the details with that. But still, this one was kind of hard to screw up. Mr. Rhoads, I know you said you liked it. Did you put any on last week, and what are your thoughts on that fly?
He was talking about a trade that nobody liked that did okay. And I guess nobody followed my trade, but everybody followed Brian's trade. No, I liked it. And one of the things that I really liked about that trade was not necessarily that I thought it was going to pay off instantly the next week, was that the way he had constructed it, the short out of the money call, the far out of the money call, was sold at a premium where if VIX had gone to 60, 70, or 80, he still would have made money on the trade. So I kind of liked that part. I liked that he was targeting, the mid to low 20s, which is kind of the sweet spot on that trade, and planned on managing it. But, if we had some sort of massive volatility event and we came in and the VIX future is blown through that upper short strike, he still would have been looking okay on the trade.
Yeah, that's kind of the way you have to. If you're going to do flies in VIX to the upside, you got to give yourself a little bit of room to run. I think I said it last week on the show. You can't do symmetrical flies. That way lies madness, or any other way. You got to really give yourself a little bit of room to run. Mr. Meatball, I know you weren't on the show last week, so you kind of missed our discussion and scooping of some cheap VIX flies last week. But what are your thoughts on VIX upside flies? And in this case, it was the 1824.29. If you have any thoughts on that, or in general, your thoughts on flies to the upside in VIX, sir.
Yeah, I think they make a lot of sense. They're relatively inexpensive. We actually did something similar at the Option Pick Conference leading into that August blow up. What I like to do is do a fly like that, and then I'll buy like one or two extra of those upside calls. So what I would have done a little differently, you said it was the 1824.29?
Yes.
So now imagine how happy you'd be feeling right now if you bought like two, let's say you did let's say 10 of those. And I'm guessing that fly was what, 50 cents, something like that?
19 cents on the show last week.
19 cents on the show last week. So you buy 10 of those for 19 cents. You spend $190. You buy, let's say, 3 extra of the 28 calls, 29 calls for what was probably 30 cents, so less than $100. And today, your 29 calls are really starting to show their teeth. They're up to about 87 cents. So you'd sell like one of those, and that would cover the entire cost of the extra calls you own. And now you've got this extra convexity on the trade. So I really like that VIX call fly approach, but then I like to buy like one or two extra kickers because if I'm right, I want that you'll get that extra convexity on the upside, and then you can basically end up owning, one or two extra cheap VIX calls for free if you do get that move, and that really allows your fly to work well.
I like that. A fly with a little extra kicker. This is why flies are so fun, listeners. As I said, the devil is in the details. You ask 5 different people how they put on their flies. They put them on 5 different ways. They also take them off 5 different ways, but always fun. Either way, at the end of the day, everyone I think you could see is leaning the same way, which is give yourself a little bit of room to run to the upside. Give yourself an opportunity to catch these kind of impressive tailwinds we get in VIX on days like today. You don't want to clip yourself. You want to give yourself a little bit of room to catch that genie in the bottle when it does happen. Let's see if there's a genie in the bottle out there in VIX options today. And the answer is, I guess, kind of. I mean, it's a strong day, don't get me wrong, but we've seen crazy days this week already. So by the standard of set just this week, not knocking the doors up. The day is young. We shall see out there. Right now, 742,000 contracts on the tape. Again, given the time of year we are, early September, just coming out of the dog days of summer, that's actually pretty impressive volume. That should be probably 1.5 of what our ADV should be right now. Instead, our ADV is a redonkulous 1.14 million contracts. That's coming in slightly down about 20,000, but after this week, probably going to go back up in the other direction. Let's break down our top 10 listeners. Let's see what's open for size in VIX options land, then we will unleash the beast known as Russell's Weekly Rundown. Right now, listeners, for all of you I know who hang on this metric, we've got 4 puts hanging out in our top 10 right now, so looking pretty juicy. We flirted very briefly with puts outnumbering calls for about a minute there. And then I think last week or 2 weeks ago, we were 5-5, so 50-50, which again is a bit of a surprise. We don't see that too often out there, unless VIX is, again, kind of threatening the 30 handle and puts are suddenly in fashion again. Right now, though, only 6 calls dominate our top 10 this week, so read into that what you will. It cost you 263,000 contracts to break into the top 10 this week. That gets you to our first of 4 puts in the top 10. That gets you to the October 15 puts. Number 9, 264,000 of the Nov 35, so right back at it, listeners. Number 8, 265,000 of the September 30s. Then we got a little put strip here. Number 7, 268,000 of the September 16 puts, followed by 287 of the Sep 15 puts. Number 5, 363,000 of the Sep 20s. Dare I say it, a reasonable strike, all things considered. I think that's more than our straddle, but we did see a straddle trade on that strike this week as well. Number 4, 381,000 of the Sep 17s, even more reasonable, dare I say it. Number 3, 396,000 of the Sep 17 puts. Number 2, 553,000 of the Sep 25s. And the big dog out there, 590,000 of the September 45s. Remember those strikes. We're going to come back to them in a little bit, listeners. But first, it is time to unleash the beast that is Russell Rhoads. It is time for Russell's Weekly Rundown.
Now, Russell's Weekly Rundown. Now, Russell's Weekly Rundown.
All right, have at it, Mr. Rhoads. The floor is yours.
You betcha. So, trade alike, trade I don't like, and a few other trades as well. Tuesday, this is an interesting trade, and I like it. This is an opening trade on Tuesday, September 3rd, using options that expired the next morning. With VIX at 1808, they sold 100 of the VIX 13 calls for 530, and they bought 200 of the VIX 15 calls for 335 each. So that's 670 minus 530. That gives us a cost of $1.40, and that's going to give us a break even of $16.40. So they did a 1x2 with VIX much higher, not terribly higher, but in the level of profitability. They paid $1.40 for it, and it looks like they held it through Wednesday morning expiration, and the cash settlement was $6.55 a spread. So that's a nice trade. I don't know if I might have considered it because you've got, $1. You've got a pretty nice buffer between break even and where the spot VIX was at the time. So kind of opposite of those trades that I've talked about with you guys, where you can find a put option that has, for lack of a better way to put it, negative time value. And if the market just, if the index doesn't move at all in the future, gravitates toward the index, you're going to do well on the put. Same thing here. You had the spot VIX at 1803, and as long as it just sat there, or 1808, excuse me, you realized an okay profit, but they lucked out with a really high VIX settlement print. Yesterday, trade I'm not real wild about. Using the Tuesday again, using the September 25th options with VIX at 1803. Somebody sold the September 25th 23 calls for 92 cents and bought 3,000 of the 24 calls for 73 cents. They took in a 19-cent credit. They're risking 81 cents. VIX does have to get up to just over 23 for them to be a bit worried about this trade. Maybe they're worried about it today. But I'm not real wild about just trying to make 19 cents off of a call spread like that, especially as volatile as VIX has been in the past few weeks and the time of year that we're going into as well. So that's probably my meh trade of the weekend or of the week. Wednesday, using the October 2nd options. We're almost to October, guys. Are we all dressing up like Australian breakdancers for Halloween?
I already have the Halloween decorations out, sir. I'm ready to go.
Are you ready to go? I've got a giant rat, on top of my building. So with VIX at 2158, look at what VIX did on Wednesday. Somebody sold the 100 of the October 2nd 32 calls for 78 cents and bought 100 of the 40 calls for 39 cents. They took in a credit of 29 cents. Risking $7.21. That's another one that, it's probably going to work, but the risk reward makes me a little queasy. How's that? And then finally, I came across a trade, and as I dug, I discovered that it was an exiting trade. So then I went and found where they had entered it. This was kind of interesting. Somebody on the surface, I'm going to tell you what I thought and then what I found. Somebody sold 200 of the September 11th, next Wednesday, VIX 60 puts for $38.90. So I was like, well, that's kind of an interesting way to be long VIX. If it goes up, that put goes down, et cetera. The worst case scenario is all of a sudden we go to the low teens or whatever. And I started doing some digging, and it turns out that this was actually an exiting trade. The previous week on the 28th and 29th, they bought 100 each day for an average price of $43.42. So it looks like a loss of $4.52 per option. We've all been there. We've all pulled the trigger and regretted it at times. I wonder how they're feeling about this, about getting out of this one, because it is very possible that we might see a reduction in VIX going into next week.
Well, if past is prologue, that's the way it's played out in the past, right?
Yeah.
We'll see if this can maintain out there or not. It looks like Vic's already taken a point off the top since we've been talking here halfway through the show. By the way, our chat is intrigued by the notion of you in a breakdancing costume, Mr. Rhoads. So they want photos of you in your breakdancing outfit. If you're gonna go for what's it, ray gun? You're gonna rock the ray gun outfit?
Totally working on it.
I can see that. Yeah, I can see that. There's no head.
Ray gun. You didn't know Russell Rhoads is actually Ray gun. Mark,
he moonlights as an Australian breakdancer.
Yes,
I do.
Yes, Raygun.
Yes.
He taught Raygun every move she knows.
He's been doing some weird stuff since the head trauma. I could see Australian breakdancing working its way. I think you could do a good kangaroo kick if you really worked on it, Mr. Rhoads. All right,
I probably could.
Let's work on some of this volume that's going up this week, because it is a tsunami of volume out there. Not so much today, like we said, listeners. Today, decent, respectable, but not blowing the doors off. 742,000 contracts right now. The big dog today in VIX land, 98,000 of the October 15 puts. Oh, you like those, listeners? Are you bailing on those bad boys? They went up exactly mid-market as VIXs want to do. So looking here, it's hard to tell. 77,000 for number 2 of the OX 16 puts. And then we got a whole put palooza here. Number 3, 56,000 of the SEP 18 puts. Number 4, 39,000 of the SEP 17 puts. And rounding out the top 5 today. We do have some calls sneaking in there. I thought you might see a few more calls given how aggressively we're moving to the upside. But 29,000 of the SEP 25s, listener. That's our only call in our top 5 today, which is kind of interesting. Yesterday, a banger, also a bit of a head scratcher. If you listened to the option block yesterday, we chatted about it with our buddy, the Flowmaster, who I do believe is lurking in the chat out there today. So maybe he has more insight onto it. We had a little bit of a discussion about what was going on out here in VIX yesterday, because it was over 1 million contracts by the time we got to the option block yesterday. Well over 1 million contracts. I think close to the volume it was for the day. And it was all in this one massive trade. The big dog yesterday was 271,000 of the SEP 45s and 234,000 for number 2 of the SEP 25. So obviously pretty much 500,000 contracts just in that part of the trade alone. Remember I said we're going to remember those strikes at the top of our top 10 right now in the OI, listeners. We're going to come back to those, and we're doing it yesterday. Number 3 was a big... It looked like on the surface there were close in the SEP 25, 45, and then rolling it out to the NOV 35 double, which was 3 and 4. 229,000 of the NOV 35s and 172,000 of the NOV doubles. Now, this is where things get weird, because it looks like it was opening paper for size on the NOVs. Probably closing, past his prologue, you're probably rolling that at that point maybe. And as we discussed on the show, the Flowmaster thought maybe because so much more paper had come in on the NOV side, they thought actually it might have been closing out there as well. So then closing on both. But then the OI numbers are in now, and we could see that it was opening on the SEP and opening on the NOV, hence the over 500,000, 590,000 of the SEP 45s on the tape right now, the number 1 spot. So it's a mess in terms of yesterday's paper, but well over 500,000 contracts in this one, call it what you will, time stupid roll adjustment. It was all things to all people apparently out there yesterday. And then rounding out the top 5 yesterday was 100,000 of the Dees 42 halves. Those we could say were closing, so at least they took those off the board. But man, yeah, just a weird one on the tape yesterday. Wednesday, another hot day, 1.4 million contracts, 115,000 of the OC 18 puts. That was the big dog yesterday, or Wednesday, excuse me. Number 2, 95,000 of the SEP 20s. Number 3, 68,000 of the OC 20 puts. Number 4, 64, almost 65,000 of our old pal, the SEP 45s, a hot strike this week. And number 5, 57,000 of, again, the SEP 25. So they're all over that SEP 25, 45 this week. Again, you would think it would be closing, but again, the size OI says otherwise. Tuesday, obviously we were closed Monday, so they were making up for lost time on Tuesday. Nearly 2.5 million contracts on the tape. We haven't seen VIX that hot in a while. 2.44 million. The big dog, just ridiculous volume. 438,000 of the SEP 30s, and that's more than pick a lot of the equity options you're going to see trade in an entire day just in those SEP 30s. That's a heck of a lot of paper. Number 2, right behind it, 396,000 of the SEP 22s. So you're talking 800, almost 850,000 contracts just in 2 trades. That's more than a typical day's worth of VIX usually just in those 2 trades. Number 3, we drop off a cliff for number 3, 118,000 of the OC 18 puts. Number 4, 96,000 of the SEP 17 puts. And number 5, 95,000 of the SEP 18 calls. So paper all over the place. Probably spend the rest of the show really parsing all of this. There's so much. Mr. Meatball, you weren't on the option block with us yesterday. So what are your thoughts first off on this crazy NOV SEP vertical madness? What do you think they were actually up to? Were they closing both? Were they opening both? I mean, the OI numbers certainly say one tail, but your intuition might tell a different tale. And then B, anything else catching your eye out there in a very hot VIX options week?
Yeah, I mean, the action yesterday was pretty aggressive. They were, it looked like, one second, let me pull up this big trade. I mean, it was a huge trade. To me, it looks like it was a close. It was a roll out of September and into November, where where they were going long, out of the 25-45 and into the 35-55. So giving up some gamma, giving up some near-dated exposure. I guess they felt like they were running out of time. But if vol really does blow up, looking at futures term structure, I think there's some value in NOV. Relative to October, I see why they used November. If we get ahead of steam here, that's going to be that contract looks like it's going to perform pretty well. Looking at the open interest, there's still massive interest on those 25 calls, 550,000 of them. And the NOVs, yeah, if you look at the change in open interest, there's some decent size there on those 35 calls now. So it almost certainly was a roll.
Yeah, it certainly looks that way. That's what I was screaming out to me yesterday. I was kind of surprised the Flowmaster was saying they thought they were closing on the NOV as well. And then the OI today is off the charts. I mean, sometimes when you have different people putting on positions, even though it's closing, it shows the OI is growing. There's some weird nuances out there with the way the OI is calculated, listeners.
But it could have been an account change is the other thing.
Yeah.
That's sometimes these trades, they look like they're huge trades going up, but they're just an account change where traders moving positions from like one clearing firm to another, or there'll be some like nuances, and that's why you think you saw a big trade, but really it's just a trade going from one account to another, but it's still the same trader.
Yeah, that's why the devil's in the details of some of this stuff, listener. Take that size OI we're seeing, the SEP strike in particular, with a bit of a hearty grain of salt out there, listeners. But yeah, it looks like a duck. It quacks like a duck. It feels to me like a roll. If they're up to something else, certainly would be an intriguing scenario. Speaking of intriguing scenarios, let's get on out some of the VIX ETPs that have been moving hot and heavy. SVIX, Mr. Rhoads' other beloved holding out there, taking a whooping out there today. Looking a little better now, gaining about half a point back since the start of the show. Was in the 23 handle when we kicked off the show. 24.20 right now. Still puts it down over 7 points, about 7.5 points from where it was this time last week. So SVIX getting taken to the woodshed out there. Surprisingly not responding on the volume front the way you might think. Only 10,000 contracts on the tape today. That's against an ADV of 22,000, which is already coming down 1,000. You think today they'd be lighting it up? I know I put on some SVIX options before the show, so you think people would be lighting it up out there today, but apparently not. Mr. Rhoads, you're a big fan of all things SVIX. What's catching your eye out there, sir?
I just added a little bit to my SVIX. I feel like maybe this thing in VIX is a bit overdone. And I sold some calls against what I bought, so I'm just trying to play around with it a bit. I feel like over the long term, we always get these great opportunities. Probably didn't get as great an opportunity as I would have hoped for. But still, a good chance to add to my position under 25. Made me kind of happy. So I do think this thing works over the long term, so I'm not particularly worried about it. UVIX, while I got the microphone, I continue to work on exit strategies that might improve it and really haven't come up with anything good. I took a look at what if when it's up in the morning, trying to use a moving stop, et cetera, nothing really improved if anything, it made things worse, trying to take advantage of up days like that. So I'm still playing around with that one. I'll still continue to put that one on every weekend. I'll go ahead and share with you or with everybody else what I shared with you late yesterday, because it was a holiday week and I have a calendar alert to remind me to sell my SVIX on the open on Mondays. I didn't sell it on Tuesday until about halfway through the day. I mean, my UVIX. I didn't sell it till about halfway through the day, so I did a lot better than
worked out pretty well for you this time.
One.
Yeah, I was watching that, and I know people were asking. I think Jim Carroll was asking on Twitter to ask for an update about that trade, and I was looking at it this week, and I was thinking the same thing. I was like, if I did it the way I was doing it in the past, and the way you want to do it, if you want to rigidly stick to the rules of the game, and you're really just trying to cover the weekend effect, I would get in on the close on Friday, of course, and get out right on the open on Monday. And if you did that, you did all right. You got, a quarter of a point, third of a point. You can't be angry with it. But you missed out on the multiple handles that fell into your lap on Tuesday, sir, as a result. So, yeah, it seems like it's still it's an intriguing one, because you're right. You don't want to carry that through half a day if you don't have to, because that way lies madness, right?
No. And that's not the point behind it either. And I one of the things that I know in my relatively old age within our industry is that the systematic approaches are a lot smarter than I am. So if I've got a systematic approach, I'm pretty stringent with respect to the rules, as long as I remember the rules. But so that's where I'm at on that one. I got at around 490 instead of 440.
Yeah. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, sir. And
exactly.
It works out in that case. Mr. Rhoads, in my case, I was traveling the week of the 10-handle move in UVIX, missed the best move in the history of that product. So, hey, better sometimes to not be lucky, I suppose. Mr. Meatball, you're all in on all SVIX right now. You've launched the new product. What's catching your eye out there, sir?
Yeah, so we're flat the stock and we're long breakout trade, which basically means we own positions that take advantage of a really strong move in SVIX. So with the indicators we have right now say that the likelihood of a really strong move up or down in SVIX in the next couple of days is growing. So, could we see a scenario where SVIX is back in the teens on Monday? Yes. Could it be back above 30 on Monday? Yes. But it is priced for a very strong vol move right now based on all the metrics that I watch.
Flat with the breakout position. That looks like kind of what I have on in SVIX right now. Interesting. I'm doing your newsletter, so I didn't even know it. All right.
Oh, nice.
Let's keep rolling. Let's keep rolling out here to some of the other products. We talked on UVIX, UVXY 30 3/4. I know some of you love it out there. The UVXY Defense Force wants a whole show about it. It was up about 10 handles, up about 8 3/4 right now. Doing some numbers out there today, 91,000 on the tape versus an ADV of 84,000, which has fallen nearly 20,000 in the wrong direction. So I'm guessing today and this week going to help lift it up. VXX was a banger out there as well earlier today, 58. That puts it up a whopping 13 points at the start of the show. It's at a 57 right now, so only giving up 1 point over the course of the show. So VXX doing its best to reverse split yet again. 37,000. Got up to about 60 last time, I believe, too. So here we go. Reverse splitting yet again. 37,000 contracts on the tape. That is also exactly the ADV right now, which is kind of interesting. Mr. Meatball, I know you said in the past you were a little bit intrigued by VXX at these new lofty levels. You playing in VXX at all?
I was in VXX, but, when my indicator said this thing was going to potentially shoot higher, I got the heck out of Dodge. It's, if SVIX is going to break out one way or the other, VXX is in the same kind of boat. They're almost perfectly negatively correlated, almost. There are some differences there where, SVIX tends to have a little less beta than VXX because of the hedging activities in SVIX. But yes, VXX is going to break out one way or the other.
It's like it's breaking out to 60 almost right now. We'll see if that can continue, listeners. And, we got a little time. Let's do a little quick volatility voicemail because you folks are just popping off left and right.
It's time to share your thoughts and opinions with your fellow volatility traders. It's time to check the volatility voicemail. Make your voice heard by dialing 779-669-4VOL. Posting a comment on the optionsinsider.com, sending an email to questions@theoptionsinsider.com, or posting your questions to twitter.com/options. or facebook.com/The Options Insider.
All right, everybody, let's get down to business here. A lot of people enjoying the show out there today. I think our buddy Vistologist is listening live. He says he was commenting, I think, on what Russell was saying earlier about the VIX curve. And, never one to be shy with the GIF. He posted, it looks like this is Rocky running on the beach, talking to Adrian, saying, I'm afraid, all right? You want to hear me say it? So, yeah, he's a little spooked right now, given everything we're seeing out there in the vols. It's okay, Jim. We're here to talk you off the ledge. That's what we're here for. Timberdoodle, he enjoyed the show last week. He enjoyed the VIX fly in particular. He said that VIX trade was super goodly profitable indeed. Yes, you are correct, Mr. Timberdoodle. That one worked out, I think so. Hopefully, if you listen, listeners, it was a little no-cost dabble to the upside and certainly working out. This one just came in right before showtime. This came in for our OBC show, but you know what? We got a minute or so here. Since he's talking vol, let's see if we can touch on it right here, right now. And Yodam, if I'm mispronouncing your name, I apologize. I'll make sure we discuss it on OBC coming up soon as well, in case you only listened to that one. But he says, I'm writing here for OBC. I'm a long-time fan of the various shows of the network and have been binging since episode 1 when it started. Wow, you're one of the reasons that Boot Camp #1 continues to be our blow-away show on the planet. He says, you guys are doing an amazing job making options trading accessible and fun. Well, thank you very much, Yodam. He says, I have a practical question. How does one accurately evaluate historic volatility versus implied, i.e. to understand if volatility is over or underpriced in an ETF following a big change in their holdings? For example, XLK going from 4% to 20% NVIDIA instead of Apple going the other way. Interesting question, Yodam. And good timing. You sent it in a minute or two before Vol Views today. So perfect timing out here. Really quickly, it's an interesting thought. This is something we talk about realized versus implied all the time on the show, but not particularly in ETFs when they're changing their holdings, maybe as a result of something being divested, or in the case of NVIDIA, something just exploding to exponentially enormous parts. Mr. Rhoads, is this something you've dealt with in your research there, sir?
Yeah, the thing, if you're trying to take into account the behavior of the ETF as the holdings change a bit, when you're looking at a sector ETF like this, and XLK is the technology sector one, you've got a bunch of highly correlated stocks. So, I don't know if, because they all do kind of behave and move in the same direction, even though some do it to a different magnitude than others. I don't think it has a dramatic impact on the ETF's implied vols. I like to look at these things through the lens of a dispersion trade, and just look at the biggest names in each ETF. Look at the implied vol on 5 or 6 of the biggest names in an ETF, and compare them to the implied vol in the ETF. As the big names change periodically, what the biggest names are, it doesn't really seem to have that much of an impact on the ETF.
If ever there was an indicator that dispersion is hot, I mean, we all already knew that. We already talked about how crowded of a trade it is, but we're getting effectively dispersion questions on our basic options education program. That just shows you the game is changing, the options landscape very much evolving out there. Mr. Meatball, anything to say here for Yodam, who's intrigued by effectively a dispersion question here on ETFs when the holdings change?
I mean, there's usually a trade when they do change their holdings. But that's more of a professional trade, I find, a lot of times, because and needs to be done usually like right at the end of the day or right after the bell. It's typically not something you can do as a retail investor. Lone exception was like when the NASDAQ announced their big rebalance. There was a big opportunity that was about 18 months ago. There was a big opportunity there. But these small ETFs with like small rebalances, if you think something's going into SPY, buy it on the guess. If you're right, you'll probably make some money. But once they announce it, the big firms have already been out front of it.
All right, let's keep rolling. We got one more here really quickly from YouTube. Our Redetach just says, commenting on our episode 596, which, by the way, we're closing on episode 600 rapidly. He just wants to say, VIX 180 when? I got to get the bunkers ready. Yeah, I think he's talking about that. 180 stupid, whatever we were talking about recently on the show. Yeah, I'll let you know, Redetach, when we hit that VIX 180 level. Hopefully you're in the bunker already by that point. That one just brought a smile on my face. Let's see if the crystal ball does. Spoiler alert, I don't think any of us had north of 20 handle, but let's find out, listeners. It is time for the crystal ball.
It's time to peer into the future and reveal what the volatility gods hold in store. It's time to look into the crystal ball.
You know what? I take it back. I apologize once again. Mr. Overby, he had a 20 handle. Not close enough. He had a 20-30, but he had a 20 handle. I remember when he picked that last week. Now, our chat kind of went a little crazy. Like, 20 handle? What is he seeing? What is he smoking? But it turns out he was right, but not right enough. We're at right around a 22 3/4 as we're ending the show here, listeners. So he gets credit for at least being north of a 20-30. He was the closest, but by no means was he close. Mr. Rhoads, you were also feeling a little bit of juice this time a week ago as well. You're feeling 18.5. People thought that was optimistic. Lo and behold, not enough. The Rock Lobster was at a 14.90, and that was at a 15/4, which, as I recall, was pretty close to where we were this time last week, slightly lower. So no joy for any of us out here this week. So we'll go around the horn. Brian was closest. He is not here, obviously. So let's go to Mr. Rhoads. Mr. Rhoads, you get pride of place, sir. What are you feeling for this time next week?
1989, just under 20. I think we're going to still hold up. I think a lot of people are nervous.
An excellent year. Is it an excellent vol prediction? I guess we'll find out. Mr. Meatball, you were not on the show last week. What are you feeling in your palindromic way, sir?
I'm going to go with, for those that are Chicago area residents, I'm going to go with the Lerner and Rowe guess and go with 22222.
I started typing that before you even got it out, sir. I had 22-22. I was just feeling a 22-22 for you today, even before you dropped the hint out there. So 22-22, feeling more juice. Yeah, we're on the cusp of something, listeners. We're on the cusp of a whole heck more vol or racing back down to the doldrums. We're on the cusp of something this time next week. I don't think we'll be here at 22 3/4 again, but you never know. Meatball's guessing right where we are right now. I'm going to say we keep Russell went. I was thinking 19 3/4, but Russell kind of went right there already. That's what I get for going last, listeners. Oh, you know what? I'm going to give myself, let's go 1876. Not the best year unless you're into centennials, but perhaps a banger prediction for vol. Get your predictions in now, listeners. All right, listeners, that's going to do it for Vol Views this week. Man, a banger of a show. A lot of vol to talk about this week. A lot of products moving and shaking. Some super goodly, as we said on the show last week, profitable VIX flies in your back pocket. All sorts of other fun. Great questions, great comments, great engagement for you folks. You folks are the best. I love all of our audiences, but you Vol View folks really take it to the next level. Come from all over the world. We love you all. Keep them coming. Remember, get those, if you're listening, get your vol guesses in. Get them in by the end of the day today. And if you can knock it out of the park, a 10th of a point, you too can win fabulous prizes, listeners. Let's go around the horn. Mr. Meatball, sir. I'm guessing our crew, they want to hear some more SVIX talk. Where can they go to hear such things?
Follow me on Twitter at OptionPit. And
Mr. Rhoads, sir, where should folks go if they want more Russell goodness outside of your back-to-back appearances here on the network?
You can always find me on the Twitter. I'm always there. I'm always blogging about what happens on the weekend. I might be doing some more podcast, et cetera, type stuff as the fall goes along, but I'm still working out some of the details on all of that. But anything I do, it's always on the Twitter. On the X. Option got in our chat, 1871. What are you're totally carping me by a nickel. What are you doing? This is what I get, Mr. Rhoads. I give these people hours and hours of great content every week. And what do? They carp me right at the end of the week. There we go. Thank you for that, listeners. All right, that's going to do it for us on Vol Views this week. Remember, though, not going to do it for our pro folks, including Option Guy. I should kick him from the chat for that, but I won't do that.
Instead, he'll be back with the rest of the crew in a little bit to talk all the crazy, wild trades we have up our sleeves for Options Oddity. Should be a banger. I already talked about the VIX flies, but we got more fun to talk about. So it should be fun. Options Oddities. You know where to go to get your hands on that. TheOptionsInsider.com/pro. While you're checking out our stuff, make sure you check out the Futures Rundown as well. The newest addition to the game. Should be a hot one out there. For the rest of you on the podcast side, that will conclude your broadcast week with us. Thank you for listening, for downloading, streaming, driving up my bandwidth bills, for sending in your questions. We love all of it. Keep it coming. See you back here on Monday for a little bit of the OB and the crypto rundown, all the way through to next Friday, another episode of Volatility Views. Stay safe out there, everybody.
You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.